All right, welcome back to the Keiser Human Performance Podcast. I'm here with Coach Brandon Accardi, owner of Accardi Barbell Club, who joins us from Australia. Brandon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I have woken up pretty easily this morning because I knew I was jumping on the podcast with you. So it's 6 a.m. this morning, but I'm ready to go, so I'm pumped.
We got a strong cup of coffee, or as they say, a long black down there, and you're ready to rock. So for those that are listening, they're unfamiliar with Brandon's work. He trains a variety of athletes, including Olympians, competitive weightlifters. Tell us what's going on at the club this time of year.
We just had our nationals for weightlifting last year. So for us, our season's pretty much wrapped up, which is, it's an interesting time because now we can sort of take our time. We don't have to rush. We don't have any pressure for competition. And a lot of those things are at the back end of the year. So anyone who's trying to do world championships for weightlifting, which is the type of athlete that I typically work with. So a lot of the international competitions are at the back end of the year. For us, we acquired a lot of Keiser equipment around the middle of last year. So it was in the middle of our preparation. So it's one of those things where people are preparing for competition. They have a competition coming up and it was like 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'm going to completely change the style of training and get rid of a lot of these modalities and just switch to Keiser in the lead up to competition. You're not really sure how it's going to go. So now we're in our K.H.P.P block. A lot of people are just building capacity and I suppose getting prepared for taking training to the next level when we get back into our specific work. So for us, I can now take my time and I'm doing things a little bit differently. I'm not having to rush as far as maxing out the wattage on the Squat Pro. We're just maybe taking our time and doing some other progressions in the lead up to comp.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of excitement about the addition of that equipment. It sounds like now you can kind of take a step back for a second, with competition not being on the horizon necessarily, and really think about how can we do this over a long period of time, which I'm really interested to hear more about. I had the chance to listen to your conversation with Dr. Christopher Dale, actually, which I loved, by the way. It was an excellent conversation. Really suggest anyone listen to that. Can you tell us more about how you came across pneumatics and Keiser? You mentioned you got it last May. What was the impetus for adding Keiser?
It was one of those things where, so in Australia, the exposure for Keiser's probably not what it is in America. It's quite small and you don't really know anyone that has it. So a few years ago, I did a speed workshop with Melbourne Athletic Development. So they have a lot of great athletes and they actually had a standing squat there and a Keiser machine. And it was towards the end of day 2 and I was so burnt out and I just wanted to go home. So they turned on the compressor and it was just like such a weird experience seeing an air compressor in a gym. I was like watching them do it and I was like, look, I have no need for this. I don't know what this is. This looks like a waste of time. So I'm just going to go home. So I just went home and I watched a few of them do some reps. There was a part of me that really wishes I stayed and just used it to see what it would feel like. But I honestly couldn't care less. And it's so funny, me thinking about like my first exposure to seeing it. And then a few months later, I started getting into using that knowledge. We were doing some resisted sprinting with some of the weightlifters that I was coaching, and we were starting to introduce a lot of plyometrics. So our training was starting to diverge from just using mass all the time. So we were starting to fix a lot of the issues that my weightlifters had, which was they didn't have many general athletic qualities. They were very good at weightlifting, but the problem has always been there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of pieces in their development that had been skipped. So things like patella tendinopathy, they were getting patella tendinopathy from weightlifting, like jumper's knee from that, because their muscle wasn't elastic enough to change direction in the bottom of a squat, or they just weren't fast and powerful. So trying to problem solve it with weightlifting doesn't always work, or it wasn't working. So that's what's led me to explore different modalities with my athletes. And just I think seeing a lot of sprint work and sprint coaches, and that's just almost using Keiser equipment is almost part of the norm for the top tier athletes. And it's just how they train. Pretty sure the Jamaican MVP track club has every piece of equipment on the planet. And they've got it all, the rack and everything. So for us, it was like, well, how can we take our training to the next level? And I'd been looking for like secondhand equipment, and it was a big expense for us. We're a family business. So it was a matter of like, okay, does my dad believe in me to purchase this? It was a big decision to make. And when my friend, Dr. Dale, got the equipment, I went up to Brisbane to use it. And after I used it for the first time, I was so converted. And I messaged my dad on the way home and I was like, we need to order this. So, like, the day after we had a big workshop here, I actually paid the deposit and started with a squat pro and a belt squat based on Chris's recommendations, being that the two machines are quite different. And then I just acquired, I was really lucky at the time. I got a lot of secondhand equipment. So the stuff is so bulletproof, which a lot of people just don't really know what Keiser does in Australia. You know, usually it just sadly sometimes collects dust and people don't really utilize it to its full capacities. In about two months, I somehow went from 0 to 10 machines. And when you acquire that many machines and you're like an owner operator, I'm not just like someone who works in a commercial gym and I just manage at the desk. Like I coach everybody here. It can be really overwhelming. It's like, imagine if you got 10 new Porsches and you didn't have any Porsches, and then you wouldn't almost appreciate all of them. So it's taken me a long time to work out when I first got the lower back, I didn't really know what the lower back did. I didn't really use it that much, and now it's become one of my favorite machines. So it's taken us a while to adjust to all this new equipment, and it's completely changed the training environments. I know I've said a lot of things in that. I've said a lot of information in the last 5 minutes.
It's great. You just keep going. I'm not going to say a word.
Hopefully it gives people an understanding of, like, we had been operating for 9 years and we didn't just open up and have Keiser. We've had to learn how to train and learn what works in our world. And then we've almost acquired Keiser to like supercharge it and take it to the next level. But a lot of those principles that we've learned about training have made, the step into using it, just like a natural progression for my coaching, but also my athletes that I train.
Yeah, so it sounded like the big challenge that you were facing was some of the issues that some of your athletes were facing, like the tendinopathy, like the lack of athleticism, speed, power. I mean, weightlifting for a majority of people, the answer sometimes is more load, more load, more load, and maybe not necessarily more speed or more power. So it sounds like you were trying to increase athleticism, increase maybe the speed side of the force velocity curve, and that led you to Keiser.
Absolutely. It's funny. I think if you use weightlifting like a thrower, which is what we had been doing for maybe the last couple of years, where the goal isn't to increase load, it's just to move the same weight faster. Or if you add 5 kilos, you're still trying to prioritize velocity or peak power. But when the sport is weightlifting, people can get carried away and focus so much on how heavy they're lifting. And then that just turns it into just a strength exercise. And if you don't have that, maybe it's like a genetic component. If you just don't have that natural twitch, or you're just not explosive, or maybe you don't have a background in a lot of the guys that have done track and field, they make great weightlifters if they ever decide to transition to it. But because they just have that speed and power component from sprinting, it's interesting. So it's been a bit of a paradigm shift for a lot of people just inside my gym, but a lot of the people that I work with, they've sort of propagated that. A lot of the messaging around how we coach is slightly different to what you would typically see with weightlifting. So we often try to train people like throwers for majority of the year, and then when we try and peak for competition, then we can just bias the load a little bit more, and that's how we've been able to approach like the long-term athlete development. And Kaiser just almost added more layers to make that, almost expand that journey.
It's got to be hard because you're doing it for so long for a certain way, right? And then you need to have that trust from the athlete. You need to build that equity, that trust equity from the athlete to now trust you as a practitioner to change things, alter things that deal directly with their training, right? And ultimately their performance. So talk about that. Like, what was that like when you started to add these pieces? Obviously, they're not interacting with a barbell and mass right now. They're switching over pneumatics. It's a new stimulus for them. Tell me what that was like for the athlete.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some people, as soon as they use it, like as soon as they go down for the first time with the Squat Pro, and it looks so jerky and they're not used to that smooth feeling, they're immediately converted. They're like, oh, so that's that felt really fast, or that feels so different. And then other people, I think it takes them a while because they're not really sure why they're doing it. Some people they maybe trust me too much and they're just like, oh, whatever you say, I'll do. But they're not really that bought into the methodology or, I suppose, the why behind the programming. Where a lot of I suppose, the higher level athletes I coach, they definitely want to know. They're more curious. They are really interested in, like, why are we using this type of equipment? I've never seen this before. So, it's. I think the big one has been, one of the girls that I trained for World Championships, she had a little bit of lower back pain and, like, I don't know if it was like hip tendinopathy or whatever it was. She couldn't squat with a barbell. So we had 5 weeks to train for the World Championships in Norway. And the first week that she came to my gym, she did a training camp in the lead up to it because she lives interstate. And we were doing some front squats and they were so bad. Like, it was not good. And then I just said to her, I think we're not going to squat with a barbell for weightlifting, but snatch and clean and jerk was okay, which was great. We're just going to use the belt squat twice a week, and that's it. So, and I think she was a bit scared. She was like, "Am I going to get better, training here?" And one of the bobsledders who had just done a big off season with me, he was like looking at me like, "Can we just get rid of her now? Like, is she serious?" Because he had made such great progress. So and it worked out great. So I think there was almost like a bit of a leap of faith with it, but I think the thing with Keiser has been that we can give such a specific stimulus that targets our sport so well. So, maybe you don't deadlift heavier, which isn't the goal, but your ability to, like, not all of your strength metrics go up, but if we program it correctly, your weightlifting will dramatically change because of the speed of contraction so fast with all the lower body machines that it's just night and day difference. It's like a completely different realm of training.
Yeah, it sounded like, in listening to some of your previous conversations, one, there was an impactful podcast episode you listened to with Dennis
Yes.
that kind of resonated with you, talking about the implementation of pneumatics, but then also game speed, life speed, power. And then it kind of moved into you discussing this idea of converting speed into strength and not the other way around, not the traditional strength into speed. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, there's people have probably heard of Charlie Francis, Ben Johnson's coach.
Probably.
And he in his, like, he's famous for short to long, so trying to periodize training. Whereas in that way, where working from acceleration to max velocity and then building that speed endurance, where perhaps Carl Lewis, it was more the long to short, starting the training block with high volume, running 400s and so on. So I really like that framework of short to long, and I felt that short to long for weightlifting was trying to build acceleration, working in the shorter ranges of motion. So that means developing these faster, more explosive exercises, such as just your jerk, start with that, and then work on your second pull, which is that explosive component. And then over time, the development will come later, where we're working to the floor and in those bigger ranges of motion. Because we're still doing general strength, it made sense for me to adopt that type of periodization model for my athletes because of the way that we were training. And that's what's led to that sort of phrase, convert speed to strength, and just how the way that we were training for whatever mechanism it is that we're using, whether it's the neurological component, whether it's something in our muscle physiology, whether we're using more passive tissue to increase strength and increase stiffness, which is really, really interesting. But that's led to having significant implications on maximal strength. So if we do a lot of this, fast change of direction with our Keiser equipment, which we can without breaking people, that we just couldn't do with mass or bands, it's led to significant improvements in maximal strength. Whereas if we just did the maximal strength, perhaps we can increase the chance of injury. Perhaps we just don't get faster. We actually can decrease coordination. So a lot of these things are all interconnected. So I often use that lens as like a large scope to look through training with. And then inside of that perspective sits a lot of the implications for all the other qualities, as I mentioned, like coordination, strength, and so on.
Yeah, I love the breakdown of moving, speed into strength, and kind of how you liken that to Charlie Francis's short to long. It seems like there's this ability to take smaller chunks of a more global movement like a clean, and jerk, and work on these smaller portions of it. And it seems like you've been doing that with some of the Keiser equipment, right? You talked about the first pull, you talked about the second pull. So curious to see like how you break down that movement into chunks. And is that been your plan of attack? Like, okay, I'm going to attack the first pull and the qualities of the first pull now, and then later move into the second.
Definitely. I think when I'm looking at the equipment, I'm trying to think about what does it do? What does it do? Not just in one session, but what does it do for adaptation? So the belt squat is. So I've been really fortunate. One of my colleagues, obviously, we've spoken about him already, Dr. Christopher Dale, and he probably needs to come on this podcast because you'll
Yeah.
probably have a great chat with him as
Part
well.
two.
He'll love that. He's got a lot of Muscle Lab equipment where these Muscle Lab encoders, you can get raw data and you can just measure whatever you want. So because with our A300s, we don't have the ability to get like a force velocity profile or a force velocity curve. So he just put the encoder on the lever on the belt squat and similar on the Squat Pro. So we could just get a velocity trace, and then you can get the raw data and then put it out onto a spreadsheet and compare it with other movements. So the belt squat, the curve looks like a clean pull. It's exactly the same. And if you look at how the movement looks aesthetically, you're producing peak power at peak velocity. So you're pushing through the whole range of motion. So it's got that ascending curve, which is what a lot of people talk about, especially in Kaiser education as well. So knowing that, and that you're pushing for this in the same time frames and same range of motion, it's the same as a clean pull. So the transfer is almost 1-to-1. And then the fact that you have to change direction with it is very similar to what you would do in a clean. So there's a lot of similarities there. So I often see the belt squat as like, this is our general strength development. This is where we need to get strong and get really powerful in, because that's our first pull. And then a lot of our faster, quick change of direction, whether it's more cyclical or any of our shorter range of motion exercises, especially when they're not done that heavy, that's our jerk and that's our second pull. So in our jerk, I suppose it's common knowledge in weightlifting to see the jerk as this really heavy exercise, which it is. And then because it's so heavy, people are just stuck on that. They're just stuck on, well, how am I going to jerk? Whether it's, one of the girls that I coach, she jerks almost 130 kilos and she weighs 60 kilos. To think of it like people are skipping to the end goal. How the hell am I going to jerk 130? How am I going to jerk double body weight? So then they're automatically skipping to the last piece in their development, which is, well, let's just put 130 on, 120 on, and they do these slow, heavy jerk dips, where that's not at all how I approach it. So it's, well, there are these mechanisms, so how can we learn how to change direction well? So we talk about like weightlifting as a change of direction sport. You're just going up and down with the barbell. So it's pretty simple. You need to use the stretch shortening cycle. So you need to take up muscle slack and make sure that when you change direction, the muscle doesn't deform. So the muscle needs to be really strong like a spring and maintain tension when you dip. So the best thing for that is the Keiser Squat Pro, like fast squat. So you're working in those same ranges of motion, and you can go quite heavy, but you can also bias the velocity. Pogos, counter movement jumps. We use the Smith machine as well. A lot of general exercises, sprinting, they're all in that same sort of time frame and possessing the same demands on what's happening at the hip and knee when you're trying to use the barbell. So I suppose I've sort of broken up each of the lifts into like, okay, these are the lifts. What are the demands for each of the lifts? Dennis has the quote. Dennis and Randy share the quote, know the race, build the car. And it's just using this mechanical, I suppose it's just a great concept where you're looking at the mechanical demands of your sport and then how you can sort of build the athlete around it. Whereas, maybe people are looking at the sport wrong, and that's leading them to build the wrong car, which is why they may be losing and it's not working.
Well said. Yeah. Well said. Absolutely. I like something else you had mentioned previously, which is like, let's just take a step back and like, what is training? Like, what is working out, and what does it do? How does it feel? And what's it supposed to do? Right. And now that I take a step back and identify that and just think about that, then it's like, okay, where does pneumatics fit into this? Where does mass fit into this? Where do bands fit into this? And start building that car appropriately.
Yeah, exactly. The best thing about it is the fact that so we were using some VBT with our athletes, and then I think I've sort of gone a bit Bonderchuck with it and just gone, well, now that I know what the VBT does and how it works, I don't really need to use it anymore, or I can pull it out when I want to for the athlete, because now I know what all my exercises do, and I've tracked it long enough to see, what a time period with this type of variation does for adaptation. So we've been tracking adaptation essentially. With the Kaiser, turn the screen on and we're always tracking adaptation. competition. So we always, if I log things and progress things over time, I always know what it's doing and how they're adapting. So because we have the technology now integrated so well into our training system for all our strength and power work, it makes it really easy to know whether or not the change that we've made to the program as a whole is having a positive outcome on performance. And if we're only seeing changes in our Keiser work, but we're not seeing any transfer to our weightlifting, then perhaps the Keiser, isn't working, isn't programmed in the way that I want it, and so on. But yeah, there's so many ways we can take this.
Yeah, for sure. I know. I'm kind of thinking about that as well. But my question to you is, now that you've been able to collect data on athletes, now that you've been able to evaluate the race, think about the kind of car that you want to build, and now that you've seen stronger correlations between the Keiser and weightlifting performance, do you have a better sense? Do you have like standards that you've created now, a better sense of these standards for athletes at a certain body weight for how much power, peak power they should be producing on a certain exercise, right? If I'm on the belt squat, I know that if I weigh this amount, great lifters, right? If they have, assuming they have great technique, produce X amount of watts on that movement. Are you there? Are you there yet? Is that somewhere you're trying to get to? Is it kind of everyone is their own right now?
Yeah, I think everybody's their own. It's like saying, how fast should I lift, or how fast should I run? How fast is good? How fast is good running speed? And it's like, well, just faster. So we always get that question. It's like, how heavy should I squat? Probably a lot. It doesn't. I think it's one of those things where we're trying to. I suppose the important part is, can you have your peak power around the loads that you want to snatch and clean and jerk? I think that's probably where it's gone. So some of the athletes have peak power that are at the really heavy side of power. So for example, with the A300, we just do a load power. I suppose we do load power tests every day because it's just how we train. They're just warming up and adding load, and we're tracking the wattage as they're going up. And a lot of athletes, particularly the stronger ones, but the ones that aren't fast, which is why they need the Keiser in the first place. They might not be that good at weightlifting because they have all of their power at the heavier sides. So they need a lot of resistance to produce that force. So whether it's they need a lot of resistance to take up the muscle slack, or they just can't achieve high velocities. So even at the lighter wattages, they just can't move it fast. And that's me. So I have, 200 kilos is my peak power on the belt squat, whereas Dr. Dale's is 120 or 140. And he was a great sprinter when he was younger.
Sure.
So we want to try and think about, well, okay, if I want to clean and jerk 170, 180 kilos, I need to bring my peak power down to those loads. So I need to do training that is going to improve the capacity at those lighter sides. So it's just a matter of looking at, well, the resistance and the speed of the sport needs to match the type of Keiser training that we're doing. But that's, I suppose, looking at it through more of a specific lens. So it's almost, I think with weightlifting, the two are almost opposite, the way that I program weightlifting and Keiser. So if we want to be specific about our sport, I'll do heavy weightlifting in the lead up to competition, but really light Keiser or lighter. And then to prepare for training and in our GPP phases, we'll be doing lighter weightlifting but really heavy Keiser because we can develop strength and build capacity at those heavier loads. So they're almost opposite of each other. It's almost reversed.
Right, with some easier mechanical stress.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just because we want to prioritize velocity, because when we're doing really heavy weightlifting, velocity just drops off so fast.
Right.
And I think that's been something that I want to maintain in the program. I want that fast, twitchy feeling, and then I can just use the weightlifting as a way to, just maintain strength or, have them be fresh for performing just more snatch and clean and jerk. So I want the coordination to be precise. Yeah, so going back to that original question, I think it's about the most important thing to ask is, where is my athlete strong, rather than what's the big number, how much power do they have, or and so on.
Yeah, so breaking that down, not only is where is this athlete strong, but where is this athlete weak, right? So how do you decide how much time you want to be spending in areas that are maybe their rate limiting factor, right? And their biggest weakness versus continuing to improve their strengths and what they're really good at and why they're so successful. How do you think about that in the context of like an entire offseason leading up to competition too?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's where being really strict and systemizing training is so important. So you almost, the training system that I've created is like my boss. So I need to respect it. And what I mean by that is, for some athletes, it's just too bad if they suck at it and the whole program's really hard, because ultimately if they want to get better, this is a long-term development pathway for them. And where they're at right now, it doesn't matter if they're good today. They need to be good in, like, some of them won't make a team or be on a national team for at least 2 years or 1.5 years. So I don't really care what they do in competition for nationals, even this year. What's going to matter is 2027 for a lot of them. So we can afford to just spend heaps of time on that, in that phase where they're just having fun. They have a lot of variety in their training, and then their Keiser is just trying to get them fast and powerful. So, trying to do 3 sets of 6 on the belt squat, which sucks, at 90% of peak power, trying to just work on a really fast drop on the squat pro, and trying to manufacture lots of these types of progressions. And we can just be really patient with all of that. Whereas some of the other athletes, like the girl that I was training for World Championships, we had 4 weeks to prepare in this training environment. So the program that I've written for her, I've never given to anyone else, because it's such a specific program to what she needed. And there's no way that I would make someone like belt squat heavy twice a week and do drop sets and all this type of training. Like we did Kaiser leg extensions 3 times a week, because on the Kaiser leg extension, you just can. And only people who've used it can understand that you don't really get sore from it. So there's that type of training that we were able to do. So I think the thing that I love about Kaiser is just how it fits into like the long-term development plan for me. And yeah, if they suck at it, and if their weaknesses are, well, they're not very good at the program, then that's fine. I think one thing that Kaiser's really good at is just amplifying where people are weak, as you mentioned, but more so from a coordinative perspective. So some people can't coordinate a fast change of direction, or they maybe can't get rid of the inhibition from, mass-based training where they're moving so slowly. So it's almost constrained them to, it's almost because they've been training with mass for so long, their brains just adapted to these slow speeds. So it's a matter of unlearning and learning, well, no, you can actually move quite fast, and this is how you can do it. Yeah, and it just amplifies.
And feeling safe.
Yeah. And when people try and move fast, as you know, their body will just find extension however. So looking at it from like a movement quality or a movement competency perspective, going like, oh my God, when we intensify this, you're just using your spine. And like, even on the squat pro, people start like extending through their neck. They just hinge from their hip. They don't really flex their knee when they go down. So it's a matter of looking at it from that lens and saying, well, you can't extend your hip. So if we use Kaiser, we need to make sure it stays within these parameters. This is the technique that we want to adopt. And then we need to do a lot of other training to allow you to actually intensify your Kaiser, or intensify all of your training, because the things that you're struggling here, you also suck at in your weightlifting.
Have you started playing around with any isometrics yet? With some of the Kaiser equipment?
I think I'm like an anti-isometric guy, which is fine. It's more so that I think some of the literature and research that I've read about how it can decrease passive stiffness, I suppose, is just like, well, I don't really want to decrease passive stiffness. I want to increase passive stiffness. So if isometrics do that, then that's not something I want to do with my athletes. But it's just not really how I train. But that's I not get frustrated, but I'm like, oh, okay, that's isometrics, yeah. But that's just my perspective. I'm very passionate about the topic.
Well, no problem. I mean, look, you're building a specific type of car too, right? And a lot of your cars are, for the most part, go, go, go. They got to be able to accelerate, and they got to be able to accelerate fast.
Yeah, I think like if I'm going to spend time on training, our athletes need to be really jacked. They need to be really muscly. So there's like bodybuilding circuits and those type of things that we do. Like we get everybody on the machines upstairs, and they do 3 sets of 15 on 8 machines, and they just go through it as a circuit. So there's a lot of other ways that I suppose we try and think about how we can get people stronger and have a good workout as well. Like I want them to be interested in this training system for a long time. But yes, that's isometrics.
I like what you mentioned. No, just ask it. Now we know you're not an isometrics guy. I like what you said about this idea of transferability and adaptation and breaking things down into more singular parts of the body, like the leg extension, right? Like it's working at a single joint. And I think a lot of people would ask, like, how does that impact something like a clean and jerk, right? How could a machine that is one specific joint that's not ground-based impact a movement a weightlifting movement, a more global movement at all? And to that, you would say,
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's two components to that. One is when we're doing even our fast Keiser work, we're using our muscles passively when we're trying to change direction, especially in the eccentric phase. So, and then that's the same when we're trying to change direction out of a heavy clean or catch a snatch. We're having to rely a lot on these passive structures. So, just looking at it from that perspective, just because they're strong in that movement, but they're using a lot of passive range of motion and elasticity to do that in the muscle. So if we not just think about elasticity as just a tendon thing, it's how muscles lengthen as well. Leg extension is necessary because we need to train them actively. Like we can't train them passively all the time because we run into issues. And watching a weightlifter get on a leg extension for the first time is so funny because they almost don't know how to recruit those muscles, even though those tissues are so large, which is weird. And, when in a single joint movement, people aren't really sure how to recruit those muscle tissues. They maybe don't have a good neurological connection. They maybe just get VMO and they just get one area on their quad. They actually can't recruit their rectus femoris at all. So it's quite interesting in how people struggle on those type of like single joint bodybuilding type exercises. And I suppose the other thing is I resonate with I really like the concept from Franz Bosch talking about how at different movement speeds, certain muscles will have a greater contribution to the overall force production. So they'll almost be like a predominant muscle at this velocity. So when you see transfer, it's like, this movement, looks the same, but because it's not at the same velocity, you're not recruiting those same muscles in the same way. So, but the body's very specific, I think, in the way that it works, and you can be very specific with the adaptation that you want. So for the leg extension, I mean, having an exercise where we can go slow, medium, fast. I mean, that's the benefit of Keiser. We can train the muscle at all speeds. So that, in a sense, which is something that I'm probably looking forward to learning more about over the next few years. But it's pretty game changing.
well, it's funny because you said, this single joint machine that's more of a bodybuilding type machine. With mass-based resistance, for the most part, it is more of a hypertrophy-based bodybuilding machine. But with Keiser, it's a little bit different, right? You're not playing by the same rules of physics. So it kind of goes from being a bodybuilding machine to a really useful tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when we layer on like the coordination aspect to it, when I get people to do a faster leg extension, it looks awful because they actually are just using their joint, or there's a lot of like braking when they're coming in on the eccentric. So you can maybe see how they need to start with that bodybuilding style where they're starting slow and then they can just build the speed up, and that can be just a logical progression, but you can actually go there now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, how do you go about diagnosing these issues within a more global movement? Is it your coach's eye? Is it using actual numbers? How do you identify
Like an
their
assessment
greatest
process.
challenge within a big movement? Yeah.
I suppose it's probably just a coaching experience. I think like watching someone squat on the belt squat where they can't use their lower back, or their spine, I suppose, isn't locked like it would be in a back squat, and that it's not trying to create tension globally. You've almost got your upper body is almost cut off from the movement. You have to just rely on using your hips, quads. And then when people still try and use their lower back in those movements, well, then it just amplifies. These are things that they need to work on. So I suppose it's probably aesthetic how I look at the movement. It's I'm trying to assess the coordination of the exercise. How's the movement being sequenced, like the joint sequence? Where are they extending from? Where are they strong in the movement, as we've spoken about earlier? But I don't have like a right to left asymmetry, so to speak. We do some exercises like that, like a step up, barbell step up, and things like that. But I think just looking at, because the leg extension is unilateral, seeing one leg come up before the other, people are automatically like, oh, that's bad. And that's the knee that hurts, is the one that lags. So I'm like, well, you need to fix that. So one of the ladies that I just did a patellar tendinopathy rehab with, she saw a physio, and a physio said that, this side is like 1/5 as strong as the other side. And then it's been 8 weeks of just using Keiser leg extensions 3 times a week, and now both sides are exactly the same. And the other reason why she wanted to go back to the physio appointment was to get the strength testing done again, just to see what the difference was. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think the cool part about creating a training system is you can integrate a lot of these assessments into the training process. So I'm not an osteo or physio or chiro, so I don't have a lot of that that knowledge where I can assess someone and do table tests and things like that. So I think for me, it's just about integrating, what are the things that are important to me and important to being a successful athlete in your sport. So for me, it's mostly specializing in weightlifting. So then a lot of the exercises that I do also act as assessments, because these are the gold standards that I want to see in each of those movements. And I suppose that's something that I've just developed over time.
I'm curious to know more about your programming leading into competition, specifically for weightlifting, how much you're using Keiser leading into competition, or if you're not trying to use it at all. Like, I'm really curious about this peaking phase and what that looks like.
Yeah, I use it. I'd say I use it all the time, even maybe leading into competition. I think some athletes get really fatigued from it. So then perhaps we need to take it out of the program for that week. There are some athletes who, the ones that particularly struggle with it or, can't get really high wattages, but they're very strong. Those are the type of athletes that when they do a good session or they hit a PB on the Squat Pro, they're neurologically fatigued. They're extremely fatigued. So what we find with Keiser is we don't often get DOMS or muscle soreness from it, as you know, but we do get quite a lot of neurological fatigue, and they can get cooked. They can get very, very tired in the lead up to competition. So I think for us, it's just a matter of just pulling back the training volume, just like you would with any other piece of equipment. So for us, we still want to do 1 or 2 fast sets, or maybe we want to prioritize maybe just like, one top set. So with our belt squats, we might do like Dr. Chris Dale and I, we call it the power stroke, where we do 3 threes heavy and then 2 sets of 5 as a back down set. And the back down set's significantly lighter. And we just won't do the 3x3 heavy. We'll just do the 1 heavy set and still do the back offs. But I think it's important to also keep training load relatively similar heading into competition, because we're just trying to understand what does this training load do for competition. So just learning more about our training. And then if we think of like peaking for competition as just trying to have, rather than peaking for a singular day, we just want to be trending upwards over this, 1 to 2 week period. So we have a bigger window for performance. Not using mass and not doing slow things and not having our brain remember a slow rep and is important to me. So I think I like to keep it all the time.
Interesting. So your velocity or your more velocity dominant athletes don't experience quite as much that neuromuscular fatigue.
I had a guy do a competition and use Keiser in the morning because he was worried about.
I was going to ask.
He was upset that he was going to miss out on an exposure. So on the day of competition, I said to him not to come in. Lockie, he's a bobsledder. They just missed out on the Winter Olympics by 1 spot, and he wants.
He's in a lot of your videos.
Yeah, Lockie, you would have seen him on Instagram. So he wants to have a good crack at some weightlifting now, but he was so upset that he was going to miss out on his belt squat and Squat Pro exposure that he came into the gym in the morning, and then I couldn't believe that he did it. So my dad and I run the business together, and I think my dad sent me a photo. Yeah, then he came and competed later, and he had a great competition. It was amazing. So
when he's ready, he will be a great coach.
He already is a good coach. He's a good coach as well. Yeah.
Yeah. What an ally to have in your room.
I know. The best.
You can tell from these videos that you have a fun time too with it.
I think we have too much fun.
I was going to ask about that potentiation aspect, right? How many people are trying to hit some Keiser maybe in the morning or right before competition? But it's a really interesting thing I haven't thought about was your force dominant athletes and how that may impact them with neuromuscular fatigue. It's super interesting.
Yeah. It sucks. It's not good because they need the velocity. Well, it's probably because they don't need velocity as much for their actual sport. So because they're just a slower type of athlete, like they end up applying force for a long time, and that's their way of getting around it. So in weightlifting, you could just pull for longer, or the slower your lift is not really, it's just that you need more time to whether take up the slack or to produce that speed. And because there's no time limit on how long the lift can take, you can afford to have that slower, longer, bigger range of motion pull in weightlifting, and that's okay. And that sort of allows these people to still succeed in weightlifting, and like they can just, if they're really fast under the bar, or they can just catch in a deep range of motion, then it sort of saves them. But in those faster power type of exercises, they just get exposed because they're constrained to how much time they can apply force for. But yeah, with the way that we train, so we train most of the year doing Keiser first. So Keiser's the first thing we do in our program, and then we do our weightlifting after. So if we have 2 power sessions in our program, we have a heavy power and a fast power. On both days, regardless, the Keiser will be at the start of the session, and then they'll weightlift at the end, regardless of what their weightlifting is. So these are for the athletes that compete. And then the program that I write for the club here, so all the members that train, they have 1 day a week where they do that, and the other day it's flipped. So it's more like your traditional sort of do your weightlifting, then you squat at the end. Because I think it's it can be quite toxic in a good way, where they're all hanging around squatting at the end, and they all congregate at the end of the program. But for those who want that long-term development, I often get them to start with that stuff at the start of the program. So we do that, I suppose we do long to short, or we do it the opposite way in the training sessions at the moment, where we're doing the heavier, maybe faster Keiser at the start, bigger range of motion, and then we might do some faster work at the end, and then we like to flip it as well. So it's there's sort of 2 types of how I program it, and then that leads to some really good potentiation effects, because particularly when people catch a power clean, it almost looks like they just stand up instantly in that amortization phase, because they're just so used to Keiser, where the demands of the Keiser are far exceed whatever you're going to experience in your weightlifting, and the speed of contraction is so fast in the Squat Pro that you just can't touch anything in the mass world that's even similar to that. So when you do that and then you start your power cleans, they just look like they've been supercharged.
Makes you think about the last 10 years, huh? Before adding this.
I think though, I know. Where would we be, Gabe? Where would we be? What would we be doing? We'd probably be doing, I don't know. We'd probably be on the moon.
You'd be on the moon.
That's what
I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd jump and you'd be on the moon.
Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned
I wouldn't have known what to do with it though. I wouldn't have known how to train.
Right.
I think I needed to learn how to train first and how to coach people, and then get this. I don't feel sorry for people that have it. I almost feel sorry for people that get it all at the start of their career, or if they walk into a place and they're working somewhere and they have access to it everywhere. I feel like that struggle of not having it means that when you do get it, you appreciate it so much more. Especially as a business owner and someone who's I've purchased it myself. It's different, but that's my.
I agree with you because I think it would be hard to appreciate what's going on underneath the hood, what's actually happening with this exercise. What are the actual forces that are being put on this athlete or this athlete is interacting with? And you think about that with mass for so long. And I even heard on your own journey, right? You started trying to manipulate the force curve with bands, right? Correct. The next step was cool, what are bands doing? And then you got to Keiser and you're like, okay, now I can achieve something totally different. And now I can see where this fits in. And you kind of miss that if you just start there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's almost like where we are with everything else in the world, where we exchange, which everything's so convenient, and the Keiser is so convenient as well. And if you take that almost that part where it was a little bit ghetto and a little bit bootleg, where we were trying to manipulate things, and even just across the 10 years of coaching, that's just at this place, I don't know, you'd be taking a lot of experience away just by jumping to the end goal. It's no different to you'd be skipping pieces in your coaching development, just like you would be skipping pieces in your athlete's development. If we just went to, you're a beginner and day one, you're going to do fast Keiser squats. Well, you're jumping to the end goal. Then they're not ready for that. Let them learn how to train, and then we can supercharge it later. I think, yeah, it's probably more of a philosophical thing though.
Well, it's you can build a fast car, but maybe you don't understand exactly why the car is fast, right? Or when the car needs better brakes versus better acceleration.
So then when you make a change, exactly. So that when you make a change, you make it worse, which is I think how people have often stumbled across a lot of these things. So there's even some of my colleagues, they've used some of these exercises in the past, but maybe not known why they worked or had a framework for them, and then drifted away from them and not had as great a result. So by integrating the measurement into training and looking at training in this way, it just means that when you build a system that's, I suppose, has that built into it. So your system, Chris and I have a similar training system because we've done our education together, and just the way that we train people is the same. So he'll just say the training system's talking to us. It's just funny. And we end up doing things in the same way. We write the same program, and then we'll talk about it later to each other and go, oh, I didn't even tell you that I was going to do that, but we both did the same thing. So it's almost through investigating our own training system or building this thing, it almost has these sensors built into it. So it steers our athletes to continued development, almost talks to us, tells us what to do. Clairvoyant, but anyway.
I love that. It's the system talking to us.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear a little bit about the low back first, and then I have another piece I want to ask you about how you use it. But I think the low back is a really underappreciated piece. What have you found to be really helpful in using this piece?
We recently started doing a lot of hip extension in the program where it was just like it's just dedicated 3 days a week. They have to do some form of hip extension, and the lower back's one of them. So we got like the lower back, a reverse leg press, and then a Bulgarian split squat on the Keiser, but it's with the emphasis on hip extension. So all really hard to do, and I suppose the Bulgarian's the hardest as far as trying to coordinate it because there's so many other moving pieces. But the lower back's really interesting because when people get on it for the first time, they actually can't feel. They actually just feel their lower back. They don't feel their glute. So that if we look at the lower back as just a Keiser hip thrust, it's essentially a Keiser hip thrust. Dr. Chris, I hadn't used it much, and then we had a training camp here, an Accardi camp after nationals, and we had a lot of athletes where compete at nationals from interstate, and they all stayed down. And Chris was really interested in it, so he came and hung out with all my athletes, and so we manipulated the position for the setup. So it was Chris's idea, and I suppose using his like sprint knowledge and what he wanted to see on that, we started just using it single leg and just trying to work on pulling the heel down so we could get a lot of activation through our posterior chain, through our hamstring and glute. And we're almost getting like hamstring tendon, bottom of the glute on that, which was so different to what they had felt on any other exercise. And because of the way the machine works, you can just do, sounds crazy, but you can just do like sets of 50 each side or like sets of 30 each side. So it almost takes that long for people to feel that area working, particularly at the lighter resistances, which I think is interesting in order to build that neurological connection to that muscle. And particularly for people like these weightlifters, they've been training for a long time. They still have small glutes. They don't have big, they're not really powerful at hip extension, but we need hip extension to catch it clean, to propel the bar in the second pull. We can't just use our lower back for the next 5-10 years. And that's been really interesting. So I think that's going to be a game changer. So I'm keen to see what that looks like long term. And yeah, that's the lower back.
Is there any specific cueing that you found to be really successful to help them feel it in the glute?
Yeah, well, that's what we worked on with Chris. So a lot of people really struggled to they just thought about, shortening through their erectors. And then when they would lean forward, they would just flex their spines. Using the hip strap, pushing into the hip strap as hard as you can, using that as a cue, thinking of it like a hip thrust. And then we had the feet a little bit higher, and we just started stacking up some blocks on the pad for the shorter athletes because they couldn't touch the floor. So it make sure that the knee's staying fixed. So the only moving parts, like if you do a hinge, if you do an RDL, you want to try and lock some of the joints so that you're just flexing and extending from the hip. So same thing in the lower back. So I use it single leg, and we don't want to see any movement around the knee. Otherwise, they just lean forward and use their quads, which sucks. It's like a hip extension exercise. So people on machines, it's funny. People will find any way, even on a strict path. That everything's almost made for you. They'll still find a way to compensate. So just trying to, coach it and be specific about what we want to see has been cool. So yeah, I don't really know anyone that has a lower back, so I don't really have anyone to talk about that with.
If I take a screen grab, right, of somebody on it and rotate it, it basically looks like that single leg RDL.
Yes.
It looks very similar. Yeah. Like the same amount of knee flexion, right? And a lot of hinging from that hip.
Yeah, which is probably why we've wanted people have the toes floating off the edge of the foot pad. So, it probably sets them up in that right posture.
Have you used the air squat? Have you done RDLs on the air squat? So
no,
hinges?
I like a good morning.
Yes.
No, I haven't. No. Chris said he did it. He did it for his back rehab. He loved it.
It's awesome. It pushes you right into
I think we're just scratching the surface of what we can do here, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to add a shoulder press.
Yeah, we do have a shoulder press, yes.
You got one? Insane. Okay, cool.
The Keiser, we call it the seated jerk, but it's pretty much, it's almost like someone that was a weightlifter designed it, because I've never felt a military press where you can get your hands that far behind your head. It feels like a jerk.
Yeah, and talk about, someone in that setting for you who maybe has an injury, a lower limb injury, and to be able to still experience those forces, the speed of contractions with a piece, while they're maybe nursing a lower limb injury, must be pretty awesome and a great feeling for them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's never a thing we can't do. But even just the way that I'm looking at the machines are just so functional, even though they probably get a lot of hate. I think just they're the best. And it's changed my way of like looking at, or like there are these eccentric demands, or there are these other forces that we're probably not really prepared for overhead, that when we're doing weightlifting, there's probably a whole nother conversation. Something I don't really talk too much about because, I mean, if you don't have the equipment to use it, it's pretty difficult to sort of try and replicate it. But I suppose the athletes that have done throwing, done med ball throws, done like a lot of GPP style training in their track work, or done like fast bench press and their throwers, they don't really struggle with the same things weightlifters who have done a lot of weightlifting struggle with. So they don't really press things out. Just the timing of again, training at different speeds, what it does.
Okay. Well, let's go back to that term, right? You said that they're a very functional piece. Like, they've been labeled as not functional? It really depends on your definition of what's functional,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like, what is function?
Yeah, it's a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? I think it's been. I suppose people looking at our training probably think we're insane, and maybe we are a little bit. But seeing how you can just be so precise about how you want that stimulus to go into the body, like how you want someone to perform the movement, but then being on a machine and seeing how people can compensate so hard, and try and cheat it and bastardize it, particularly on the belt squat or even the squat pro. It just means that that person might look really good in a barbell back squat, but they've just learned how to cheat the movement and compensate around it. And your coaching eye probably has just seen a lot of people compensate squats in the same way, so it almost looks normal. Like if there's a slight lean forward, it almost looks like a natural coordination pattern on a squat. Or the fact that people might always have a flexed hip at the top of the squat and they don't really get hip extension. If you do that on a belt squat, you almost look silly. It almost looks like you're just extending with your knees and bowing and leaning forward. So the machines expose so much more to your coaching eye than you might not be aware of when you're using barbells, which supposedly, sometimes people talk about them as being more functional, free weights and whatever, just because you're having to stabilize it in one plane. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think it just
Right.
flips coaching on its head.
It does. And I think it's important to revisit every now and then, especially with these machines, is at the end of the day, it goes back to the same thing. Like, what is your definition of function? Is it being able to perform a task? Is it being able to perform a task in an efficient manner? And I think machines, one of the advantages of them is that they're able to create constraints. And when you have more constraint, it's easier to identify maybe where points of weakness are. And if I have more constraint, I have more validity. I have more validity. I have more reliability. With Keiser specifically, you have a way to objectively measure it. And now you can go train it, see if you improve, and now see if that local improvement improves a more global task, because you can't lose sight of the global task. For you, it's weightlifting. Like, you have to be able to use a barbell and weightlift. That is your competition. Literally, that's the competition. So you're not losing sight of that, but it's being able to identify and like ask, well, okay, is this local change now impacting this global performance? But how can you identify the local issue change if you don't have a machine to do that?
I think for us, it's probably something that good track and field coaches are being underappreciated for, because they are just using the gym to build more robust athletes or intensify the track. So whatever's happening on the track, then they can easily see like there are these two environments. There's the track and the gym, and then whatever changes they want to make. If they can't make any influences in the gym to the track, well, then the gym's not working. They need to change it. Whereas for us, Keiser is our track. Keiser is our, is almost our track and field, our sprinting for weightlifting. And then weightlifting is our sport. So for us, it's almost like we make changes here. Okay, did it influence the weightlifting? If so, why? And then it almost feeds like a bit of a loop or a bit of a feedback loop to, if we intensify our Keiser, it should intensify our weightlifting. And if we get better at weightlifting, it usually intensifies the other. It's almost like the 1080 method. So 1080 sprint, the robotic resistance, you've got overspeed, you've got assisted and resisted sprinting, and how, manipulate those to work on different parts in the sprint and train those areas. So our 1080 is Keiser. And if we want to work at different speeds and specifically target those speeds, so resisted sprinting, that might be my jerk development. It's my, cyclical reps. And then perhaps like overspeed. If we want to overspeed it, go faster than whatever we can do. That's just training with Keiser fast. And then if we want to, get stronger, resisted sprinting, or then use it for strength. So I suppose maybe that's another way of looking at it. I don't know what weightlifting coaches will do with that knowledge, or other coaches will do with that knowledge. But yeah, it's just another way of looking at training. And I think 1080 is probably one of the best ways to sort of conceptualize how it integrates into the system. And that's, I suppose, what we've tried to adopt.
It's awesome. Okay. So Brandon, for anyone that is interested in learning more about what you do or following you, where can they go?
Yeah, they can have a look at my content on Instagram. I have an education portal called the Coaches Portal on a membership site called the Weightlifting Mentorship. And inside there, I have there's like 140 or so videos. Some of them are exercise library type exercise type videos. Some of them are case studies and guest presentations on there as well. We have like Bushucksnaders on there on the portal as well. There's just a lot of really cool, unique pieces of information on there. So if people want to learn more, I think that's the best way to sort of get into our world. But yeah, thank you.
And where are you located? So if anyone's down under visiting, where can they find you?
Yeah. Message me. I'm located in Melbourne, Australia, Victoria. Yeah, I'm in the suburb's called Bundoora. But yeah, it's just a small suburb in the northern part of Melbourne. But yeah.
Oh, I appreciate it. And make sure, if you are listening, make sure you do yourself a favor and follow Brandon at Brandon A_. He shares, I mean, I'm looking at your Instagram page right now. He shares a lot of awesome content, some great videos, and also you have a YouTube page, correct?
I do have a YouTube channel. Yes.
What I liked about some of your YouTube channels too is you just get to see raw training.
Yes.
It's not edited, unedited raw training.
I think that's cool. I think, I don't know, I think we're in an interesting phase. The content needs to be integrated into the system as well. So I want to put the little amount of effort as possible into that. And, I just have a camera. I'm into photography and things like that. So I just have these cameras. So I may as well use them for work. Yeah, I think just the raw footage is cool for people to see. I like that. I've sort of grown up on the Cal Strength training vlogs where it's just this gym in America and they just show raw footage of them lifting, and I just watch it before I go and train. So I want to make something similar.
No, I agree. I think it is really cool and a lot different than what you see in a lot of social media. So I appreciate you that. And I would say keep doing that because it's awesome. All right. Well, Brandon, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for taking some time on your Wednesday morning, my Tuesday afternoon here to join us on the Keiser Human Performance Podcast. We really appreciate it. Can't wait to catch up with you soon. We'll have to do another episode with Dr. Dale. Absolutely. 100%.
Absolutely. You will. Yes. Thank you so much, Gabe. Appreciate it.
All right.